We are live. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting. We have as our guest tonight, Erica Sosa. Erica Sosa, PhD, is Associate Dean for Research, Co-Director, Center for Community-Based and Applied Health Research, and full professor, Public Health, the University of Texas at San Antonio. As a bicultural researcher, Dr. Sosa has contributed to several community-based and culturally tailored research projects. She has 20 years experience in designing, implementing, and evaluating complex public health interventions, and she is an expert in using mixed methods approaches to evaluate lifestyle, systemic, and multi-level public health interventions. As the co-director of the Center for Community-Based and Applied Health Research, she leads transdisciplinary research projects incorporating community stakeholders and a community advisory board input. She is an American Evaluation Association Minority Serving Institution Fellow with training in culturally responsive and equitable evaluation. Dr. Sosa is co-author of Latino Health and Mental Health Practices and Challenges. She is dedicated to contributing her expertise to initiatives that promote health equity among marginalized and underserved communities. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited
Thank
to be
you
here.
for being here. You're going to be a great guest this evening. Tell us about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. I was born and raised here and spent most of my life here other than leaving for my PhD. I came right back home.
You came home.
I did.
And why did you come home? What is it that brought you back home when you have so many academic achievements? You probably could choose anywhere in the world to work.
Yeah, well, San Antonio is home. It's just a wonderful city, first of all, but also we have a lot of the opportunities for improving our health here as well. So my main focuses have been diabetes and obesity prevention research. And unfortunately, San Antonio has a lot of opportunities for addressing both diabetes and obesity locally. So I saw a great need here as well and wanted to do my work here.
Well, Erica, with all your achievements, do you ever sleep?
I try to.
Well, how is it that you are able to, or were and are able to accomplish so much in what, in my mind, seems like a short period of time?
I think a lot of passion and really good teammates. And so everything I do in public health is naturally interdisciplinary team science work. I partner with really strong people around me to get things done. So I'm very happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that you did not start out in public health, that you started out with a different major.
That's right. So in my undergraduate degree, I was interested in psychology and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the degree. I just was interested in learning why people think the way they think and why they behave in certain ways. And as I was working on that degree, then there was a job opportunity to be a research assistant and to help if you had a strong statistics background. And I was fortunate to have a strong statistics background from all the psychology courses I had taken. We had done a lot of statistics and analysis. And so I applied for the position, and it happened to be in diabetes prevention research. And diabetes runs in my family. My grandfather passed away when I was 5 years old after complications with type 2 diabetes. And the idea of diabetes prevention was brand new to me at this point. So it got me very excited to hear that there was any way of preventing type 2 diabetes. And as I learned more about the literature, that there's so much strong evidence out there that lifestyle interventions can be more effective than even metformin. You know, the diabetes prevention program showed that. And so I got really excited about this idea of improving people's lives and helping to address health issues that I didn't even realize at the time were preventable. And so I switched over to health after my master's was in psychology, switched over to health for my PhD, and I've been in public health ever since.
Well, I know you have a textbook. Tell us about your recent book, Latino Health and Mental Health Practices and Challenges. It sounds as though you're combining your psychology background with your health background.
Yes, I am. And so, my area in public health, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for improving the health of Latinas and Latinos. And one, also recognizing the complex nature of that group. We look at us as a really big homogenous group, but there's a lot of different subgroups and there's a lot of different health issues, and as well as really great cultural values of each of the subgroups. So I really wanted to explore that. And I wrote this book, co-authoring with a psychologist in California. So the two of us were able to combine our expertise, and I could delve back into the psychology part as well. So it was a really fun book to write and to explore some of the ways that we can improve health outcomes for the Latino community.
Now, Erica, our topic tonight is titled Writing Support for Faculty and Students. Now, how is it we're speaking about writing and not talking about health or psychology?
Yeah, because it's all related. So I am my training's in public health and psychology, but one thing that I learned during my doctoral program was the importance of writing, and I think this came up again recently. So a lot of the work more recently has been focused on the public health issue of our time, COVID-19. And one thing we realized during the pandemic was the importance of information and the way that that information is communicated to the public. I think COVID-19 really exposed a lot of the disconnect between academia and research and everybody else, right? The community, and how we can talk the same language because we understand each other, but then we didn't really have those relationships built with the community well enough to have that bi-directional communication. And so I've long had an interest in just the ability of writing because it's a method of communication and it makes all the difference. One of my professors during my PhD said that if you go into research, you're a professional writer. And if you go into academia, you're a professional writer. And just the idea of us being a professional writer is really given me a great interest in developing this skill, not only in myself, but in helping others develop it as well.
Well, Erica, it sounds like if there's anyone who is best prepared to tell us about writing, it would be you. So let's jump in. We have 6 topics. Where would you like to start?
So we can start on, we can get right into the critical role of writing and research if you like.
Okie doke.
So like I mentioned, one of my professors had mentioned that we are professional writers. It's what we do. And a lot of the bio that was written about me is really a lot about my writing, about writing a textbook. If you're a professor, a lot of the writing you do is for grants, to get grant dollars in, to get projects going. And then so much of it is on our publications. So the critical skill of writing for us is really life or death, you know, in the academic world. But then we also look at our students too, and they've done national surveys where they've asked, what is the most critical skill you want your students to come out with? And a lot of faculty will say it's strong writing skills and strong academic writing skills. And yet we don't really have places in our coursework where we just focus on writing. If you're an English communications major or something like that, you may take additional coursework there, but all the other majors, we just sort of expect our students to learn it as they go and to develop it in their classes, but we don't really have a focus on it, even though it is such a critical skill. Mm-hmm. And then and then looking at the way that we're able to communicate important stuff like public health information becomes really, really important.
Now, you mentioned academic writing. What would be a difference or differences between academic writing and non-academic writing?
Sure. So I think academic writing is really that focused on publications and research papers and things that you may do in your classes. And so it goes beyond making sure that we're grammatically correct and that we're following all the basic English rules. And it goes into being able to write effectively. So being able to write concisely and effectively and develop that strong skill set where we can talk in technical terms, but be very clear in our writing.
I'm reminded years ago, I taught a course. I am one who places a lot of emphasis on writing. I also believe that students should be able to write. And I had a student who would use a lot of flowery. Oh, I just lost the word flowery. My mouth is all twisted up. What do I want to say? He used a lot of adjectives. Okay, he used a lot of adjectives, and I wondered, oh my goodness, does he think that that will impress me? I want to see how plainly he might write. And later I learned that his aspiration was to be a sports broadcaster. So his style of writing was building up to being a television sportscaster. So would you elaborate more on the differences between academic writing and non-academic writing?
Sure. So, like you brought up one really good point. We want people to write concisely in academic writing. So, one
Right.
thing where I feel like we unintentionally set students up for later challenges is many times when we do have writing activities, we have a minimum word count or we have a minimum page count. So, we want to make sure that they're not writing too short, that they're filling it out. But we put more focus on the quantity than the quality in those senses. And then when you get into academic professions, many times we have maximum page counts or maximum word counts. We don't have minimum. So we are very much looking for people to be able to write concisely, to communicate their message effectively in a short amount of time. So it's really the opposite skill set that our students need. Is really we should be trying to get them to effectively communicate the message in a short, concise manner.
Earlier, you also mentioned writing grants. What's the special approach to writing successful grants?
Oh, that's the $1 million secret right there. I think there's a lot of things. I think one is finding the right home for your grant. So making sure that there's a proper fit to the funding agency that you're applying for, but then really being able to follow all the writing techniques to where it makes it as simple as possible. So you have to think about yourself being in the reviewer's seat. So a lot of times the reviewers who are reviewing all these different grant proposals have 30, 40 that they have to read through. And so doing little things to make it as simple as possible for them can make a big difference. So some things I like to do is make a list of your terms that you're using throughout your grant, because sometimes you lose track of it. So you think you're using the same terminology, but you've switched it just subtly 2 or 3 times. So make a list of the key terms that are going to keep coming up in your grant, and then go back through it and make sure you're staying consistent with the terminology. Other things you can do are, if it allows you to, add tables or charts and things like that that visually are appealing and get your message across versus trying to read through a paragraph to understand it. Anything like that that you can do to make it easier for the reviewer will get you a couple of extra points in the right direction.
So, Erica, in your experience, we're talking about writing, but you just happen to mention tables and graphs. As an academician, where should you place your emphasis? On the words or on graphics that would say more than words can say?
I think it really depends on who your audience is, but they say a picture is worth 1,000 words for a reason, right? It does concisely share a message that a lot of times many words cannot do as efficiently. And so as much as possible, we like to use tables, and especially that's for grant writing and maybe being reviewed by another academic. But then also when we're dealing with community communications, we want to make sure that those are as visually appealing as possible and as easy to understand. As much as we can, we want to reduce the jargon as well on those messages.
Jargon is a good word as well. Right, reduce the jargon. In fact, I was almost going in that direction. For whom should we write? You know, the joke is about writing as if you're writing for your mother or writing for a layperson.
Yes.
What is the approach that you recommend? Write as if you're writing for peers, such as a peer review journal, or should you write as if you're writing for a layperson?
So I think that really depends. But one thing that a professor once told me that I liked was that your idea should be complex, your words should be simple.
Oh,
So kind of mentioning what you had talked about that student, like we don't want to necessarily write with really large academic words. If they're unnecessary, we can communicate more effectively, simply. And so again, your ideas can be very complex, but you can still communicate them in a manner that anyone, regardless of degree, would be able to capture generally what you're trying to say. And so I think in that case, there really shouldn't be a difference between your grandma or the academic. It should be very clear and simple. And then maybe the academic is going to think about it intellectually a little bit differently, but it should be a very simply conveyed message.
Well, one of the rules I always heard was, why use a 25-cent word when a 5-cent word will do?
There you go. There you go.
Well, we better pick another topic here.
Yeah.
All right, where do we go next?
We can go into writing practices for increasing productivity.
Okey-dokey.
So a couple of the things that we recommend, and a lot of this I got into as the associate dean. So in my role for being the associate dean for the college, I'm really supposed to promote research and support research among our faculty researchers as well as our students. And I couldn't see doing that without working through writing. It's just so critical. It's such a key component of the research process. And so what I've tried to do is share a lot of writing practices with our faculty for increasing their productivity. And I think the number one thing is writing every single day. And so writing, like any other skill, if you can write every single day, and this comes from a lot of studies that have been done on faculty productivity related to writing. And so even 15 minutes every day just keeps you engaged with whatever writing piece you're working on and helps you to develop it as a daily writing habit to be more productive.
In fact, I think we hear novelists, writers say that they force themselves to write every day, that they'll start their mornings forcing themselves to write every day. Is that the same thinking, the same approach?
It is, yes. And there's so many benefits to it because sometimes people believe that they have to wait till they're in the writing mood or until creativity strikes for them to sit down. But sometimes just sitting down and writing every day can help spark that creativity. It also helps you to think about it subconsciously when you're away from the writing piece, that ideas will come to you more naturally as you have it on your mind versus if you're visiting it once every 2 or 3 months, you're less likely to have those sparks of creativity in between the sessions.
And you said there's research to support that.
There is, yes, there is a lot of research in this area about writing productivity among faculty researchers specifically, but it can be carried out with anyone. So,
Wow, that's very interesting. I did not know there was research to support that. I thought it was just like, what do we call it? Just, what do we call it? Mother's advice or whatever we call it. What is that? Anyway, I digress. Where shall we go next?
Yes, and so we can go to writing groups next. And so Peter Elbow is the one who's done a lot of work in this area as far as writing productivity and the daily writing. So one of the things that we did in the college to help promote daily writing is we did writing groups. And this is a great idea for anybody because we did it during the pandemic. So it doesn't even have to be face-to-face. It can be virtually. But we set up daily writing groups where we had faculty sign up for any of the sessions. They started as early as 7 a.m. and then on the hour through about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And they were Zoom meetings where we'd have 4 or 5 people dedicate themselves to a certain time. They'd show up, we'd get in the Zoom call, we'd talk about our writing activity for that day that we're going to focus on, and then we would spend 1 hour of just writing. And then we'd come back at the end, share our success, and leave for the day.
Do you mean write separately, or would you have a common document that you wrote?
No, so we would write separately, and it was people throughout the college too. So I could be there as a public health professor with somebody from psychology and nutrition, and we're working on 3 different papers, but we are just keeping ourselves accountable to show up that day to write for 1 hour. We don't share our screens or anything, so it's just sort of a just the accountability is there by being physically in the same space on the Zoom meeting. But again, you know that's your appointment every day, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you have that meeting to show up to write for an hour.
And that seems to be tied with the earlier bullet about writing practices for increasing productivity.
Correct. So it's getting us to write every day, but it's also getting rid of the potential isolation that some people feel from writing. So a couple of the barriers that have been studied with writing is that it tends to be a lonely process. It's more of a go to your room, go to your office, shut the door, and take care of your writing. And some people don't like that, especially people like me. I like to be around people. So sometimes this can make it a little bit more social. It can make it a little bit more friendly and warm of an experience. Even if I'm writing by myself on my laptop, I'm in the same presence of other people.
Well, how do you make it social? Especially if you're each writing individual pieces and not a collective document.
Yeah, so we're just sharing our experiences together. So just by knowing that we're there, we're also able to talk about our research a little bit. So we'll spend the first 5 minutes sharing what we're going to write on. And we typically won't say, I'm working on a grant, but we might say, I'm working on a grant and it's going to NIH. It's going to focus on diabetes prevention. I'm working with this group of people. And we learn a little bit more about each other. But then we do the 50 minutes of writing and then we do a 5-minute share out. And at that point, we get to say things like, I got through the introduction, I wrote the methods, and we get to celebrate together when we submit a paper or when we move a project forward. And so it makes it more of a social experience that we're cheering each other on, even if we're not involved in each other's writing projects.
So you critique each other's work.
We don't have to, but we can. So I've done other writing groups where we come together once a week and we share drafts of our paper with each other, like 1 or 2 pages, and we can critique each other's work that way. But in these daily writing sessions, it's just about knowing that we're helping each other stay accountable to that daily writing process and that we're making progress in the writing pieces.
I have various writing projects that where I collaborate with others. And we've been using a collective document and then
Yeah.
go back in and write comments and uh, even cut and paste things from other documents as suggestions that another writer could use. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm working on a project right now, and my belief is if you wrote something good once, you don't need to recreate it. You can restate it as necessary if you can make it
Sure.
fit if it fits into another project that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Where should we go next?
Let's see. We can go into we can go into some more writing practices. So other pieces that help with productivity, because we moved through this pretty quickly, is also separating the writing and editing process. So a lot of times when people sit down, they may have a little bit of writer's block looking at that same blank piece of paper, or I guess now on a computer, a blank Word document. They'll write the first sentence, they'll edit it, they'll fix it, they'll keep fixing it, and until it looks really good, they'll move on to sentence number two. But that ends up being a slower process because we're going back and forth in our mind from creativity to editing and critiquing. And
Hmm.
so what we would be better off doing is setting a timer and writing for 15 minutes. There can be typos. Sometimes I like to put a paper on top of my screen so I can't see the little red and green lines pop up, and just writing and getting all the creativity out on the page. Then after the 15 minutes, you can remove it, or you can look at what you have and then go through and edit and critique it. And then it's being more efficient than trying to go back and forth.
So, Erica, I am an inefficient writer.
Oh.
I tend to edit while but and you will comment on this, I'm sure. It's good to write and come back the next day or the later in the afternoon, let's say, to read what you've written. I'm a jogger, and I do my best thinking, maybe my best creative thinking, when I jog.
Yeah.
And I come back, and if I don't, I come back and I just unload my brain with all of the words and things that I thought about while I was jogging, just to make sure that I will remember it and add it to the piece that I might be writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you're writing somewhat consistently, then being away from it keeps you thinking about that writing piece to come back to it. Yeah.
Mhm. But
Yeah.
when you return to it a year later, you say, "I can't believe I wrote that."
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
happen?
I don't read stuff from a year ago.
Or when you look back at your bachelor's program
Oh
writing, or
gosh, yes.
oh, I can't believe I wrote that. Okay, give us another topic.
Yeah, yeah. And so another piece is disseminating information versus bi-directional sharing. So a lot of my work is in community engaged research. And so I think a big piece of this is how we engage in multiple outlets, right? So we're not just writing for research journals. Again, that's where we get siloed into academia being on one side and everybody else being on the other side. But looking for outlets where we can have more practitioners and more community members reading our work. And so things that you're great at, more on the social media side, or getting out to the community where they're at and meeting them where they're at as well.
I just thought of something. Now you're an educator in higher education.
Correct.
Those who are in particularly elementary school educators will recognize the ongoing continuous debate of whole language or phonetics. And I mention this now because I have students where it's clear which one they learned, which approach their teachers use, whether it's phonetics or whole language, when you look at the spelling, when you look at other aspects of their writing. So where do you stand on that? How important is spelling? How important is grammar? Or is it more important that the person just simply expresses him or herself?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think it is important because you want to be well understood by as many people as possible. So I do think it's important. I think maybe it's really tailoring to who you're communicating to some extent. So I don't have a harsh stance either way on that one.
Hmm.
Just as long as you can be understood, that's a critical point.
Yeah, see, I toy with, or maybe not toy is the word, it's more extensive than that. When I read students' work or see their presentations, and I've got to ask myself, well, what's important here? What is
Yeah.
it that really matters? Does it matter that the E and I that they wrote something homophonic rather than the way it actually is spelled. What really matters here? What really matters? And I've got to discipline myself sometimes to not comment on those the spelling and the writing, those type things, when that's not the real purpose that they're doing the project.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Erica, we have around 5 minutes left, so we have some time. Give us another topic.
Let me see. I think other things that we're really trying to work on is I think really increasing the writing process, right? But then also separating the writing from the editing. And here's an editing tip I have. So a lot of times we develop an outline prior to starting the writing process, and we sort of say we want to hit topic A, B, C in this order. But then when we start writing, a lot of times we deviate from that, and we kind of get a little creative, which is good. But then when we go back and edit, we're editing a huge chunk of text, and we're trying to make sense of it and place it where it's supposed to go to make it flow. So some things we can do is, if we've written well, each paragraph has a key idea to it. So we can create a reverse outline, where we take a key idea from the paragraph and we put it on a separate page, a key idea from the next paragraph, put it on a separate page, and we create this outline. Then you can go through the outline and you can see if it flows, if the order flows, and what needs to be rearranged, what doesn't go. And it allows you to work with a simple bulleted outline to kind of fix the flow and what makes sense, versus trying to address this whole mass text. Because if a line comes out, that means a paragraph probably doesn't belong. If you put the third line in front of the second line, you need to move the paragraphs, and then you can edit them within the paragraph. But that helps to simplify the editing process, so you're not trying to tackle a huge page of text.
Well, I got to tell you, I must admit that I never learned how to use outlines. And I said, as a college student or a high school student, when your writing teacher would say, use an outline, write an outline, I'd say that was adding a step that wasn't absolutely necessary. What do you think?
I think it's necessary. But typically because I want to make sure that I hit certain points. And if I think because I get creative in the writing, sometimes I don't want to deviate off and not hit a critical point that I needed to hit. So I do typically start with an outline, write my paper, then develop the reverse outline and try to hold myself true to it.
Yeah. I might try that reverse outline. I've not heard that one before. That sounds good. It reminds me of some other things that I've done to learn massive amounts of information. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a
The
good time saver.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's a good tip. Well, Erica, we have like 2 minutes remaining. Of all the things we discuss, what would be the takeaway that you would want our audience to have?
I think the importance of writing effectively, it's so critical, and we're focused really on writing, but it's communication in general, especially like I said, with the pandemic, being able to write effectively and communicate effectively is probably central to everything that we do in education in general. We can't educate if we're not able to communicate effectively what our messages are.
You just opened another topic. We were speaking about students earlier. And I've seen and I've read, I've heard writers, teachers of writing argue that students, even if they're writing for social media, at least they're writing. Where do you stand?
I think there's a big responsibility whenever we're communicating, especially on social media with such a mass audience. So I think writing is good, but being able to be responsible in the way that we communicate that message and do it effectively is critical. I've also heard lots of stories of people getting in trouble by what they read on social media. So I do think there's a certain responsibility that comes with that.
Right. Okay. Given all this information, what do you want people to do with it? What is their call to action?
Supporting writing. So practicing their own writing. And if there are faculty, really giving their students multiple opportunities to not just write and get a grade, but to really develop that skill set, because it's so critical to what they'll do professionally, no matter what area they go into.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And if people want to know more, if they want to contact you, how shall they do so?
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn, and they can also contact me at my email address, erica.sosa@utsa.edu.
Well, thank you for being our guest tonight. Erica Sosa, PhD, is Associate Dean for Research, Co-Director, Center for Community-Based and Applied Health Research, and full professor, Public Health the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm David Johnson, Transform Ed Consulting, and I'd like to give my thanks to my dear colleague, Cassandra Williams, who is the brains behind Educational Innovations 360 Degrees, for allowing us to use her channel. So thank you for being with us this evening, and I hope you have a great night.